In this video, we want to set up a Cisco Unified Contact Center Express server, and we're going to attach it to our HQ switch. And notice that it has the same IP address that we had previously given our Cisco Unity Express virtual machine, but that was sort of a temporary install. I wanted to show you how it would work, but we've already got a messaging solution for our headquarters, so I decided to take it out. I wanted to show you how to install it, but I don't want to leave it at the headquarters. In its place, we're going to put a Unified Contact Center Express server, and this can help us with call center applications. Somebody calls into customer support, for example, and they want to be directed to somebody that can help them maybe with their billing or with their technical support issue on their product. Well, we can intelligently route calls coming into a call center using this server. We can have a lead number that people call into, and we could be very creative and write our own scripts to say, if you have a billing issue, press 1. If you have a tech support issue, press 2, and so on. We could create these menu structures. In this video, though, we just want to show you how to get it up and going, how to get it installed, and at the end of this video, we want to have a phone to be able to join a queue that's called a CSQ, a contact service queue. It's the grouping of phones that can receive calls when we call into this lead number. And I'm going to call into that lead number, and hopefully our phone's going to be able to answer. So that'll be just a basic install of Unified Contact Center Express. Let's get started by going out to the live interface. Before we install UCCX on its own virtual machine, we've got a prerequisite. Remember when we installed the IM Presence Server, we had to create a DNS entry for that server? Well, same thing here with the UCCX server. We need to add an A record, an alias record, to our DNS server. And you might remember we created a server called HQ-AD for Active Directory, and that was a Microsoft Windows 2012 R2 server. Let's go into that server. I'll put it in a different tab. And let's find our DNS manager. Let's do a search for DNS. And we'll open up the DNS manager. And here under the forward lookup zones is cisco.local. Here's where we created our HQ-IMNP entry earlier. But under the reverse lookup zones, we didn't really need to do that for the IMNP server. We're going to need to have an entry here, though, under the reverse lookup zones in order to install UCCX, however, because it's going to do a reverse DNS lookup and say, hey, what's the fully qualified domain name of the IP address of 10.3.3.6? So we need to be able to look that up. But easy enough done. We can just right-click on this, say we want to create a new zone, and we're in the subnet of 10.3.3.0/24. So I'm going to say that I'm going to create an IP version 4 reverse lookup zone, and it's going to be 10.3.3. And you notice here's the zone name it gives it. It puts it in reverse order. I'll say next, and next, and next, and finish. And we've created a reverse lookup zone now. That allows us to add a pointer record, a PTR record, when I create this alias entry. So I'm going to right click under forward lookup zones. I'll say, let's create a new host, a new A record, and the name is going to be HQ-UCCX, and the IP address is going to be 10.3.3.6, and I'll make sure that I've got the create associated pointer record checkbox selected, and we'll say add host. That was created successfully. We'll say that we are done. Now we can go back and create the virtual machine for UCCX. So let's say, go back to virtual machines. Let's say we want to create a new virtual machine, and we'll say next. And I'm going to name it HQ-UCCX for Unified Contact Center Express. We're going to say the capability is ESXi 5.5 virtual machine. We'll say that we're running a flavor of Linux, and we'll say it's CentOS 4/5 or later. And we'll say next. We're going to be using our one and only data store. We'll say that we want a couple of CPU cores. For the memory, let's set that to 8 gigabytes of memory. For the hard drive, we'll do 160 gigabytes, and I'll do it thin provisioned so we don't take up a lot of hard drive space right now. And for the CD, we want to boot up on this CD, this virtual CD, to a data store ISO file, which, by the way, I've already uploaded to save time. Here it is. And I know that we're dealing with Communications Manager Server 12.0 and version 12.0 of Cisco Unity Connection Server, but this 11.6 version of UCCX, that is current for the CCI collaboration blueprint. So we're going to install that. Select it. Say next. And finish. We'll let it create the VM. And let's go to it and power it up. And I'll put this in another tab for us. And of course, these installations do take quite some time, so after we enter the data we need to enter, I'll skip most of that process in the video so you don't have to sit through it. We don't want to analyze our media, so I'll say we want to skip that. And it's going to ask us what we want to install. And there's only going to be one option. It's Unified Contact Center Express. So here in a moment, it'll come back and say, what application would you like to install? And I fast forwarded through that part for you. So if you're doing it on your own, you think it works so quick with Kevin's. No, I actually did a fast forward so you didn't have to watch all that. But we've just got our one option here. We're going to say, yes, we'd love to install UCCX. And we'll say that, yes, we do want to proceed with the install. And we'll proceed with the configuration wizard. I don't have any patches I want to apply, and I want to do a basic installation. And we'll set the time zone to America, New York. It's Eastern Time. We won't try to hard code speed or duplex of our virtual NIC. We don't want to adjust our MTU size. I'm going to make the host name HQ-UCCX, and we'll give it an IP address of 10.3.3.6 with a 24-bit subnet mask, 255.255.255.0, and our gateway, which is our virtual router. We installed a Cisco CSR 1000 V router earlier. It's got an IP address of 10.3.3.100. We'll say OK to that. And we've only got one DNS server, and it's our Microsoft Windows 2012 R2 server. And we just added a record for this server that we're installing now. And we're going to say its address is 10.3.3.5. I'll not specify a secondary DNS server because I don't have one configured. And we'll say our domain is cisco.local to match what we had on that DNS server. So OK to that. The administrator ID, I'll just call it administrator. I'll give a password. And we'll say OK. The organization is Kevin Wallace Training. The unit is development. Location is in Richmond. State is Kentucky, United States. OK to that. Yes, we're the first node in the cluster. Our NTP server is our CSR 1000 V router. So that's 10.3.3.100. And we'll say OK. And I'll give a security password. I do not want to configure SMTP on this machine, so I'll say no. For the application username, I typically use that administrator username again, so I'll say administrator and give a password. Say OK, and we'll say yes, we're ready to start the install. Now, because we're installing this on a VM, it's going to come back in a moment and say, hey, you need to reinitialize your drives, which is what it's doing now. So I'm going to say, no problem, reinitialize all, and we're off. Now, this next portion is going to take a while to go through everything. In fact, it might take on the order of a couple of hours or so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video here, and if it comes back and prompts me for something, we'll rejoin the video at that time. Otherwise, we're just going to let this cruise through and complete the installation, and I'll see you back when it's all done. Well, great news. Our UCCX server is installed, and I've pointed a browser over to the IP address of our server, which was 10.3.3.6. Interestingly, when I pointed to the IP address, it resolved it to the DNS name. So we're at hq-uccx.cisco.local, and we want to go into Cisco Unified Contact Center Express Administration. And we'll say we know that it's not a trusted site because it's a self-signed certificate, but we're okay with that. And let's get logged in. And the first time we log in after a fresh install, we're going to be prompted to go through this little wizard. It's asking what is the IP address of our Communications Manager server. Well, in our case, it's 10.3.3.1 and the Axel admin username. We could have gone into Communications Manager and created a different user with a specific set of permissions, but here in the lab environment, I typically just say administrator because it has all the permissions we need, and I'll give the password of the administrator user over on my Communications Manager server, and we'll say next. I'll say that I want to activate the 60-day premium demo license by saying next. And it takes a while for this adding license process to complete, so I'll fast forward through that part of the video. All right, after a long delay, the temporary license has been added, and we're going to say next. And it's going to take a few moments for these services to activate. And our service is finally activated, so let's click Next again. And we'll click Next again to activate these services. And if we did have any other Communication Manager servers, maybe like some subscribers that will be listed over in this pane, we could move them over. In fact, it's the best practice to put the subscribers ahead of the publishers. After all, the publishers, they're busy enough dealing with other things. But here, I don't have any extra subscriber servers. It knows my username and password. Let's move our Communications Manager server over as our CTI manager. And what's going to happen here, it's going to create a user that's used for call control. It's going to be a JTAPI user. And I want to say that my user prefix is JTAPI. I'll give that user a password and a matching password. Let's add our server to the RMCM subsystem. And here we're going to create a user that's going to be controlling the phones. And we can specify that username. I'm going to say it's simply RMCM. And I'll give a password. And we'll say next. I'll leave our codec at G711. We'll say next again. We'll select our language. I'm going to select English US. And next. And we need to select a user over on Communications Manager that's going to be given the responsibility of being the manager or the administrator of our UCCX server. And I could create a special user for this. I could create a user named UCCX as an example, but I'm just going to make it easy. I'll select an existing user of HQ Phone 1, and I'll move that one over. But again, you could create a user whose sole purpose in life is to do this job, and I'll say finish. And at this point, it's restarting, and it tells us to close our web browser now. So once again, I'm going to pause the video, and after the server is back up again, we'll resume. All right, we finally rebooted, and I've logged into UCCX. But before we do anything here in UCCX, let's hop over to our Communications Manager server really quick and take a look under User Management Application Users and see if we have any new users that just got created. And we sure do. There's our JTAPI_1 user. Remember, we specified the prefix of JTAPI. So we have JTAPI_1. We also had that user that was going to be in charge of phone control. That was RMCM. So those have been created. So let's go back over to UCCX. And let me show you where you can get some great documentation for working with UCCX because there's a lot to do here. But we could go under Wizard, RMCM Wizard, and look at Description of Steps. And this takes us through detailed information about all the different steps we can go through to set up UCCX. We're going to keep things a bit simpler here in this installation video. Let's begin by creating a call control group. To do that, I'll go under Subsystems, Cisco Unified CM Telephony, and I'll select Call Control Group. And let's say we want to add a new one. Add New. And for the description, I'll say CTI, that's Computer Telephony Integration, CTI ports is going to be the description. And how many CTI ports are we going to create in this group? We'll just keep it at 2 just for this demo. And I'll say the device name prefix of these ports will just be CTI. That'll be easy to recognize. And each of these CTI ports need phone numbers. So I'm going to start at 2301, and then the next one will automatically be 2302. Need to assign a device pool. This is at the HQ site. Let's assign the HQ calling search space. And I'll assign the HQ location. And we'll put these numbers, just like we've been doing with all of our phone numbers on our phones, I'll put this in our internal partition. Let's click on Add and bounce over to our Communications Manager server really quick just to make sure those two ports did indeed get created. Well, let's go under Device and Phone. A CTI port's going to be considered to be a phone. It can place and receive calls, and we've got a couple of them. CTI 2301 and 2302. Those are our CTI ports. Excellent. And while we're here, let's go revisit this application user that we saw earlier that got created, our JTAPI_1 user. I want you to notice that the CTI ports, they are now listed as being controlled by this user. And Communications Manager now realizes we're integrating with a UCCX server, so we can specify an IP contact center primary extension for our users. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go under End User, and we've got an end user for each of our phones. Let's go into HQ Phone 1, and if we scroll down a bit, we see that we now have an IPCC extension. That's the IP Contact Center extension. I'm going to select 2001, and I'm going to save that. And I'm going to do the same thing for our other end user. Well, one of our other end users, HQ Phone 2. I'm doing it with our two IP phones. That'll be enough for our demonstration purposes. So we'll select 2002 as its IP Contact Center extension. And let's go back over to UCCX. And since we've assigned those extensions, we should now have our users showing up as resources inside of UCCX. If we go under Subsystems, RMCM Resources, we see that we have our two users. Let's go into HQ Phone 1. And we see right now that this user is not assigned to any resource group. It doesn't have any assigned skills. We'll take a look at all that later, but we do have our two users. Now, something we have to do here, our users that are now showing up in UCCX, they need to have some privileges assigned. To do that, we're going to go under Tools, User Management. Let's go into User View. And notice that this shows all of the users on Communications Manager, not just the ones to which we've assigned an IPCC extension. Let's go into HQ Phone 1, and I want to add reporting and supervisor capabilities. Remember HQ Phone 1, we said that that's going to be the user that's the administrator of our UCCX server. We did that instead of creating a special user just for UCCX. So let's do an update to this user. And I'll add some privileges to HQ Phone 2, maybe I'll just add reporting capabilities there so we can give different users different roles. And now that we have resources, we can create a resource group. To do that, we'll go under Subsystems, RMCM, and let's go into Resource Groups. Let's add a new one because we don't have any by default. And we're going to call this, let's call it HQ-Group. And do a save. Next, we can create a new skill. To create a skill, we go under Subsystems, RMCM again, and let's go into Skills. Let's say that we want to add a new skill, and maybe we have some people in our call center that take care of customer billing issues. We've got other people that take care of tech support. So the skill name might be HQ, because they're at the HQ site, HQ Billing. Let's save that. Let's add another one for HQ-tech_support. And now that we have our resources, in other words, our users, our resource group, and our skills, we can assign a resource, a user, to a particular skill and put it into a group. So let's go back to our resources. That was under Subsystems, RMCM, Resources. And let's go into HQ Phone 1. And I'm going to put this in the HQ group. And I can add both skills. And we can have a competence level for each of those skills. So maybe this person is primarily a tech support person, but they might have some billing knowledge. So for billing, I might say their competence level is a 2, but for tech support, their competence level is, let's say, an 8. And we'll just leave the default team of default. We haven't created any teams. And we'll do an update. Let's go into HQ Phone 2, and maybe they also have both skills. but this person is primarily skilled at billing, so maybe we'll give them a 7, and maybe we'll give their tech support ability a 2, and do an update. Oh, and I forgot to assign it to a group, so let's assign that to the HQ group and do an update. Now let's add a contact service queue, a CSQ, which is going to run a call queuing script. This could be a script that's built into UCCX, but typically in the real world, even though we'll use a built-in script in this video, typically in the real world, you'll want to create or customize your own script. To do that, we're going to go under Subsystems, RMCM, Contact Service Queues. Let's add a new one, and I'm going to call it HQ-CSQ. And I'll say Next. And for the resource selection criteria, I'll say whoever has been available the longest. See, we could do based on the most skilled or the least skilled, but I'll just say whoever's been available the longest. And they're going to have a certain competency level in these skills. So for HQ billing, I'll say add, and I'll say the minimum competence is a 2. And for tech support, again, I'll say the minimum competence is a 2. And this is just an example, but do you see how you could get really creative with this and have people cross-train that had different levels of expertise, and they could support different types of calls coming into a call center? I think we're done with this contact service queue, so let's click on Add. And when we're doing this in the real world, we would probably want to have our own prompts where somebody calls into our call center and we say, "Welcome to Kevin Wallace Training. Your call is very important to us. Please hold, and the next available representative will take your call." Something like that. And if you wanted to do that, the way that I normally do it is I use Cisco Unity Connection. You're saying, "Whoa, what do you mean? That's a messaging server." Yeah, but interestingly, you can use Cisco Unity Connection to record an audio file that's going to be in the right format to be used by UCCX. Or you could use some sort of audio editing software like Audacity's one that I've used that's free. But you have to have it formatted just right. I typically just use Cisco Unity Connection. If we did create our own prompts and wanted to upload them, we're not going to do that in this video, but if we did, we could go under Applications, Prompt Management. We could go into, in my case, English US, and we could say we wanted to upload prompts. However, for this installation video, we're just going to keep it simple and use the default system prompts. Now, let's create an application. Let's go under Applications, Application Management. Let's add a new one. And the application type is a Cisco script application. We'll say Next. And for the name, I'll just call it Demo-App. The maximum number of sessions we'll say is 2. And for the script, I'm going to pick S script or system script, ICD.AEF. That's the one I'll typically make a copy of if I want to create my own script. I'll start with that one and then make some adjustments. So let's just use that as it is right now. And for the CSQ, let's put inside of quotes HQ-CSQ, and let's click on Add. And we need to create a new trigger now. What's going to trigger this application to run? So we click on Add New Trigger, and the trigger type is going to be a Cisco Communications telephony trigger, in other words, a phone call. We'll say Next. And the language is going to be English US. It's going to be running the application of Demo App. Oh, and I need to give the directory number. I'm going to say it's 2300. Remember, we made our CTI ports 2301 and 2302. Well, I'm going to make the directory number to call in and activate this application 2300. For the device name, I'm just going to keep the same name that I used as my CSQ. I'll say it's HQ-CSQ. And the description, I'll say, is App Demo. And the call control group is CTI ports. And let's do a show more right here to make sure we have all of our permissions set up correctly. For example, I want the device pool to be HQ. I want the location to be HQ. I want the partition to be internal for that number of 2300. I'll not worry about the voicemail profile. We'll set the calling cert space to HQ. And I think that's good. Let's go ahead and say Add. Now let's go over to our Communications Manager and see if that CTI route point got added. That's going to trigger this application. So let's go back over to Communications Manager, and we go under Device, CTI Route Point, and we'll do a find. And there it is, HQ-CSQ. And let's go back under that application user of jtappy_1. Notice that our CTI route point is now a control device that we named HQ-CSQ. However, our RMCM user isn't so fortunate. Let's go under User Management, Application User, and take a look at that RMCM user. And notice that it doesn't have any control devices at all. So what we want to do is add the phones that are going to be using UCCX. Let's do Device Association. And we'll do a find. And let's check HQ Phone 1 and HQ Phone 2. And let's say we want to save selected changes. And we'll go back to our user. And those phones should now show up as control devices, and they do. Excellent. Now, in previous versions of UCCX, we used something called the IP phone agent to allow our phones to start receiving calls that were directed to our CSQ. But in version 11, it all changed. We now have something called Finesse. And before launching Finesse, we need to add an additional parameter to the RMCM user that's needed by Finesse. So let's go down to the bottom here of the RMCM user. And let's say we want to add to access control group. Let's do a find. And I want to check a standard CTI allow control of phone supporting rollover mode. There it is. And let's add selected. And we'll do another save. And we also need to update our UCCX end users. So let's go under User Management, End User. And let's go into HQ Phone 1. And let's say down at the bottom, we want to add to access control group. And I'll say standard CTI allow controller phone supporting connected transfer and conference. Let's also do the one for rollover mode. We'll say add selected. Let's make sure we save that. And under device association, we've already got HQ Phone 1 selected, so that's good. But we also want to select HQ Phone 2 and save selected changes. Let's go back to our user. And we don't need to do this for HQ Phone 2. You might be thinking we're doing this for all of the end users. No, we're doing it for HQ Phone 1 because this is the username that we defined as the administrator of UCCX. So we don't need to do this on our other end users. Now, to access Finesse, we have to point to the domain name of our server using a specific port and a specific path. This is not obvious. So what we're going to do is go to https://hq-uccx.cisco.local, and we're going to do a :8445. That's the port that we want to use. And we're going to point to the path of cfadmin. That's Cisco Finesse admin. That's what the CF is. And that's going to take us to the Cisco Finesse administration screen. And we're going to use the same administrator credentials that we used for our UCCX server. So that was administrator. And I'll give my password. And when it asks for a username and password, I'm going to say our username is HQ Phone 1, and I believe the password is Cisco. Let's do a save. And we're told that we need to restart the Cisco Finesse Tomcat service in order for this to take effect. So to do that, from the UCCX screen, we can go to Navigation and choose Cisco Unified CCX Serviceability and go. We'll go under Tools and Control Center for Network Services. By the way, the Tomcat service, that's the web service that gives us access via the web. Let's select that radio button and say Restart. And while we're waiting on that to restart, we can go back over to Communications Manager and set up a phone service. Because what we want these IP phones to do is to log in to the Finesse IP phone agent service so they can join a queue and start receiving calls coming in to that CSQ. So let's go under Device and Device Settings. And we want to set up a new phone service. So let's select Phone Services. We'll say Add New. And I'm going to call this what I oftentimes call it is just IPPA. It's the new version of IP Phone Agent, so it's easy for me to recognize what that means. Now, the service URL is a bit different than it used to be. I'm going to say http://hq-uccx.cisco.local, and that's going to be on port 8082/FIPPA for Finesse IP Phone Agent. And I'm going to use a variable here. It's going to be a £, and then in all uppercase, no spaces, we say device name. Now, this is not a variable where you're going to put in your device name. It's actually literally device name in all caps, no spaces between £. And I want to enable this service. I'm not going to do an enterprise subscription, which would apply to all phones. Typically, we want to apply services to individual phones. So I'll say save. And there are some parameters that we want to pass when we access this service on our IP phones. We want to do what's called one-touch login, so we can say, yes, I want to connect to IPPA, and it gives our credentials to log us in. So we need to define those parameters. Let's say new parameters, or new parameter, and the first parameter name is ID, and I'll say that's the display name as well. The default value is going to be different for different users, so we can set that up at the user level. And the description is going to be, I'll say just user ID. It is required, but it's not a password, so we don't need to mask it. Let's save that. Let's create a new parameter. This one's going to be called extension, and I'll say the display name is extension, no default value, and the parameter description is extension. And I'll save that, and let's add one more parameter, and that is going to be our password, so we will want to mask the contents. I'll say the parameter name is password. The display name is password, no default value. Parameter description is password. And this is going to be a password, so I'll say I want to mask the contents. Let's do a save and close. And we'll do an update subscriptions. And now let's assign this newly created service to our IP phones. Let's go under Device, Phone. Let's do a find. And let's go into HQ Phone 1. And under related links, we want to subscribe to a service. We'll say go. We'll select the IPPA service. We'll say next. And we can actually enter our information here. I can say my extension is 2001. My ID is HQ Phone 1. My password is Cisco. And let's subscribe. Let's do the same thing for HQ Phone 2. So I'll close this window. Let's go into HQ Phone 2 now. And we want to subscribe it to a service. The IPPA service. We'll say next. Our extension is 2002. Our ID is HQ Phone 2. Our password is Cisco. We can do a subscribe. Now I want to show you something else. Let's hop over to the self-care portal for our Communications Manager users. I'm going to go to https://10.3.3.1/UCM user. And let's get logged in as HQ Phone 1 with the password of Cisco. And under phone settings, we can take a look at our services. And we can see that HQ Phone 1 is subscribed to the IPPA service. We could click on Edit if we wanted to enter this information ourselves. Maybe as the administrator, we didn't know the password of the user. Well, the user could enter it for themselves here, but we actually did know it, so we did it as the administrator. And at this point, our phone should be able to log into that contact service queue, and we should be able to call into that main number, the main customer service number, we'll say, of 2300. And phones that are logged into that queue, they should be able to receive the call. But in order to log into the queue, they're going to select a service, the IPPA service. So let's log in HQ Phone 1 to that service, and then let's call in to 2300 from HQ Phone 2 and see if we get an automated greeting and see if we get redirected to HQ Phone 1. Here we have HQ Phone 1 and HQ Phone 2. And let's have HQ Phone 1 log into that contact service queue so that if a call comes into 2300, which is the lead number of what we're pretending is our customer service department, it's going to be able to answer. What's going to happen though if nobody's ready? Before we log in and say that we're ready, what happens? Let's try. Let's say 2300.
Thank you for calling. All of our representatives are assisting other callers at this time.
So that indicates that nobody's ready to take a call. Let's fix that. Let's press on the gear button and you'll see that we have the IPPA service available to us. I'll select 7 to go into that service. And this is one-touch login, meaning I do not have to provide a username or my extension or my password. It's all part of my user configuration that we set up. Now, I'm not currently ready, even though I am logged into this service. When I'm ready to start receiving calls, I can press the ready soft key, and now I'm ready. Let's call again into 2300.
Thank you for calling.
This time, the call shows up on HQ Phone 1. We can answer, and because they're right next to each other, we're getting some feedback, so let me hang up. But did you notice, because these are video phones, that was a video call that we had going on? Now, let's pretend it's the end of the day. This person is ready to go home. They want to set their extension to not ready, so they can say not ready. In fact, they can also say sign out and exit. And I'll exit out of that screen as well. And that's a look at how Unified Contact Center Express works at a very basic level.